Hey, my fourth grade friends, Mrs. Real here with another installment of Jed and the Junkyard War. So last we left Jed, they had found a steamboat, which is the kind of ship that Jed's grandfather, was supposed to have had, but had been in a fight, potentially with those ravens or whatever those black things were, that the ships that flew over that ignored them the first time. So they agreed to stop, search the steamboat for 2 hours. Jed was given 2 hours to see if it was his grandfather's ship, if anybody was still alive on the ship. There was just charred remains of all the ships and the steamboat at the same time. But Jed was supposed to be finding 21 cans in that 2 hours, or else he wasn't going to be allowed to get back on the ship. And so as they searched around, he found a dread that was kind of coming after him. He did find what he thought was 21 cans, but he had to run, and he tripped and he slipped and he dropped some cans. And so when he got back onto the ship, he only had 20 cans. And the captain was just going to throw him overboard and or not let him get on. And he made a deal that he would start cooking for them and make this food taste better. And if any person did not like it, any person on the crew didn't like it, then they had the right to throw him overboard as they continued to search for his grandfather. So, I don't know. These guys play kind of rough. I'm not sure I would be up for any of this. But I will share my screen. You can read along if I can hold it right, or you can just sit back and relax as we start on chapter 13. Captain Bogg told Jed to wait until Bessie was good and high before he started. Riggs flooded the turbines with extra push to propel them above the white puff of clouds. Until I say otherwise, Captain Bogg announced, the mess is closed. I've graciously granted Jed the opportunity to dumbfound us with something we've supposedly never tasted before. Made from cans we've all tasted before. Can't say I understand, but he's so insistent. He's bet his scrap life. We don't know about the rest of you, but it's been a while since we've had the treat of watching a man thrown overboard. The crew shouted a single cheer. Whatever the outcome, we all win. Either this boy makes something extraordinary, or he's the evening entertainment. Sounds like a fair deal. What do you say? More cheers. Captain Bogg petted Jed's shoulder. I want this runt to have all the help he needs. Plank walkers deserve a proper send-off. Let's make this a funeral party to remember. Jed cleared his throat. Thanks? Captain Bogg patted his shoulder again. Thoughtfulness and warm hugs. Just like I said. Let's get to work. Pobble, how about a song? He clapped his hands twice. I know just the tune, Pobble said. He scurried off and returned a moment later with his fiddle. Its knob was still broken, so half the notes wobbled. Oh, once a day or 3 ago, our Bessie run the yard. She found a scrawny, wimpy boy with mind to feed this bard. Oh, we ate and ate and ate some more until the pot was bare, when then he added shredded beef, potatoes, and a pear. He filled the pot and mashed the cans and stirred them all about until the food was ready and the men began to shout, oh. We ate and ate and ate some more until the pot was dry, then threw the boy right to his death and watched him try to fly. Sprocket clapped to the beat, and Captain Bogg tapped his foot. Now, what would you like help with? He said with enthusiasm. Jed rolled his eyes. Take me to the mess. The men followed, pobble-tailed, belting out his song. At each chorus, the crew joined in. Oh, we ate and ate and ate some more until the pot was bare. Then Pobble finished with a new line. In the mess, Jed studied the cans. How are they organized? Celebration cans here, Pobble pointed to the top shelf with applesauce, gooseberries, cranberry sauce, mandarin oranges, maraschino cherries, and sugarcane syrup. Cans for when you're hungry here, he pointed to canned meats, canned beans, tuna, and chili. Cans to eat when there's no other cans to eat, he pointed to green chilies, tomato sauce, jalapenos, and mushrooms. And cans you only eat in an emergency. He indicated the artichoke hearts, spinach, anchovies, and asparagus. If there was one word Jed loved in spaghetti, it was artistry. Get me sliced mushrooms, red peppers in oil, spinach, fire roasted tomato halves, tomato sauce, and canned chicken. Pobble picked up a can of spinach and cringed as if Jed had just asked him to eat it right then. You sure? Don't you want cans off this shelf? He patted the shelf of fruit and syrup. Jed smiled. Not today, but I'll need a frying pan. What's that? Pobble asked. It's made of metal, about this big. Jed made a circle with his hands, and it has a handle. Would a shatter keg lid work? Sprocket asked. Show me. Sprocket took Jed to a shatter keg porthole and rolled the gun into the ship. The shatter keg looked like a giant-sized version of Sprocket's shatter lance, with wheels. Sure enough, when the shatter keg was inside, a black frying pan flopped closed, covering the porthole. Perfect, said Jed. Now I'll need to build a fire. A what? Captain Bog snapped. Fire on my ship? I told you, Kaiser said. He'll burn us to ash. Jed met the captain's gaze squarely. If I don't get to whine and complain, then neither do you. I need a fire. The crew stared at the captain. If you say you need a fire, we'll make you a fire. But, he held up a finger, you try anything funny and Sprocket will put 3 rounds through your head before you can blink. Got it? Got it, Jed said. Sprocket cocked her shatterlance and winked at Jed. Got it. Good. Riggs, make the boy a fire. Do you have any idea how hard I work not to make fires on this ship? Make the fire, Captain Bogg said. Keep it contained. Riggs stalked to the engine room. When he returned, he held a contraption that looked like a toaster with 2 bent prongs sticking out of the top. He flipped a switch and electricity zapped between the prongs. I'll need something flammable, Riggs said, the words stiff in his mouth. I don't keep flammables on board as a rule. We'll hook something for you. Captain Bogg said. Sprocket, take us to hook range. Aye, Captain. Hook height it is. They returned to the main deck and Sprocket entered the bridge. Jed's stomach lurched as the tugboat dropped altitude. I don't want this getting out of control. You hear? The captain said. Jed nodded. It doesn't need to be a big fire, but I'll need it to burn for at least an hour. Sounds reasonable enough. The captain took a spyglass from his tattered coat, then adjusted its length and peered over the edge. 9 degrees starboard and release the hook. Releasing the hook, Sprocket said. Something clunked below them and a heavy chain rattled. 2 degrees port, Captain Bogg called. The tug turned. And slow. Ready to scoop, Sprocket said. Open the hook. Scoop me that bathtub 1/4 of a clip north and everything around it. Aye, aye. A bathtub? Jed asked. The chain clinked lower, and a hydraulic opening sound filled the air. When the hook reached the bathtub, the ship jolted as hook and chain crunched into junk. Sprocket, Captain Bogg said, folding the spyglass in on itself. Load the tub into the cargo hold and dump any scrap that won't burn. Yes, sir. Jed and the others followed Sprocket to the cargo hold at the rear of the boat. The chamber was empty, but for a massive 5-pronged claw attached to metal links as thick as summer sausages. A wad of scooped up junk sat clenched in its grip. The porcelain bathtub was wedged between a sofa and a phone booth. A control box hung near Jed at the end of the cable. It had 3 buttons, and one of them was red. Not now, he thought, his skin prickling with sweat. Not now. He reached into his pocket and touched the lemon. They know what they're doing. They wouldn't tell me to do this if it wasn't important. He sucked in a breath for courage and stepped forward to grab the control box. Stop! Don't touch that, Sprocket shouted. Jed reached for the red button. The Kaiser plowed into him. Jed's finger missed and squashed a black one instead. Amber lights pulsed and sirens squealed. The cargo room floor shuddered and began to sink. Cracks of light glinted from the edges of the room, and the floor tilted, preparing to dump them from the ship into the junk below. Sprocket bolted forward and snatched the control box. She jammed her thumb into a yellow button. The siren faded with a whine, and the floor settled back into place. What do you think you're doing? She yelled. Trying to kill us? Pobble and Riggs stared at Jed, eyes wide as if Jed were about to lunge at them with a knife. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Do not touch things on this ship, Sprocket said. I won't, Jed said. I'm sorry. Sprocket sighed and her shoulders relaxed. It's fine. You just startled me. Forget about it and get your junk. Forget about it, Kaiser said, his voice screeched. He just tried to kill us. He would have died too, Kaiser, Sprocket said. That'd be a pretty dumb plan. Why would he care? His dread buddies would patch him up good as new. Sprocket pressed a blue button on the control box. A depressurized sound filled the room, and the claw released its treasures. Riggs, Pobble, help me with this tub, she said, pushing past Kaiser, who stood waiting for a response. We'll grab that sofa once we get this to the main deck. Riggs and Pobble avoided Jed's eyes. Great. An hour before they vote whether to throw me overboard, and everyone thinks I'm trying to kill them. The control box swayed on its chain, red buttons smiling at Jed. Push me, it taunted. Yeah, well, I tried. Even if he went for it again, Kaiser would probably shoot him over another tackle. You coming or what? Pobble asked. Yeah, Jed pried his eyes away from the unpressed button and followed. He hurried to the front to avoid Kaiser's cold stare. When the tub and couch were on the deck, Captain Bog pointed to the tub. This is where you're going to build your fire. You want me to cook inside a bathtub? Do whatever you want in it, but the fire isn't going anywhere else. Fine. Captain Bog ripped a piece of fabric from the couch and gave it to Riggs. Riggs flipped on his machine, and electricity crackled between the rods. He dipped the fabric into the arc, and the cloth burst into flames. Let's get started, Captain Bog said, tossing a couch cushion into the bathtub. Riggs added the burning swatch, and the cushion ignited. Jed gathered the cooking supplies. Do you have any salt? Salt? Sprocket said. What do you need salt for? I got some, Pobble chirped in. Captain had me spray the stack for slugs 2 nights ago. He grabbed a leaf blower from a supply cupboard. The machine had a canister strapped to its handle. Copper hoses looped through the canister and blower. What is that? Jed asked. Pobble aimed the blower at the deck and flipped a switch. A fan hummed and salt sprayed from the nozzle. Pipe cleaner. Kills slugs clogging the tubes. He reached into the canister and removed a blue container with the words Morton iodized salt over a picture of a girl in a yellow raincoat holding a white umbrella. Jed took the canister and shook some salt into his hand. He sprinkled it over the frying pan. Whoa! Kaiser rushed forward to block the pan from the white crystals. What are you dumping that scrap in our food? Jed smiled. You're scared of a little salt? He waggled the can. Kaiser's eyes darkened. You think we'll let you add slug poison to our meal? I'm not stupid. Jed pinched some grains and tossed them into his mouth. Happy? That doesn't prove anything, he said. Your stomach's full of gears and scrap. Pobble took the salt and poured a pile into his hand, then licked the white grains. His face contorted and he spit onto the floor. Rah! He scraped his tongue with his fingernails. Kaiser's eyes went wide and blood drained from his cheeks. I knew it! Poison! Poison! It ain't poison, Pobble said, wiping the sleeve of his shirt against his tongue. It's disgusting. He spit again, then shuddered. Why are you putting that in food? Jed turned to Kaiser. Happy? I won't be happy until I watch your flailing body hit the junk. Jed picked up the frying pan. Fair enough. He turned to Captain Bog. Would you start opening cans with the tool I gave you? Captain Bog pulled the can opener from his pocket. Great. Open the red peppers and oil and the canned chicken. Captain Bog opened the cans and handed them to Jed. I need more fuel for the fire. Riggs sliced another chunk of fabric from the couch and tossed it on the flames. Use the couch's frame instead, Jed said. Too much smoke with the fabric. It'll ruin the taste. He waited for the crew to break apart the couch and add slats of wood. When the planks were crackling and the black smoke was gone, he emptied the chicken into the pan and added the red peppers and oil, making sure to coat the chunks of chicken in oil. As he set the pan atop the flames, Pavel gasped, You're burning our food! The crew stared at the flames dancing under the iron pan. Jed grinned. It'll be just fine. If you burn a dozen cans of food, the captain said, I'll let Kaiser take a few whacks at you with that pan before I toss your corpse overboard. What happened to no whining, no squealing, Jed said. Captain Boggs smirked. I suppose this is your funeral party. Burn away. When the oil started to sizzle, Jed swirled the chicken until its edges were crispy and brown. Now hand me mushrooms, spinach, and fire-roasted tomato halves. Captain Boggs sliced off the lids and gave him the cans. Jed added a quarter of the spinach, half the mushrooms, and all of the tomatoes. When all the contents were finally seared, he poured in the tomato sauce and waited for it to bubble. The crew watched in horror as Jed stirred the contents. Does anyone have a spoon? He asked. Sprocket fetched a spoon, and Jed tasted the mix. He motioned for the salt and added 3 more pinches. When he tasted it again, he nodded. Is it ready? Popple asked, confused. As ready as it can be, I guess. His stomach clenched as he watched the appalled expressions. This wasn't playing out the way it had in his mind. The crew was supposed to take one whiff of the cooking food and suddenly realize how tragic their every meal had been up until this point. Probably too much to ask, but at least they weren't supposed to be so disgusted just by the preparation. A sick sensation jabbed at his stomach. He glanced at the tug's railing and pictured himself tipping over it, falling, until... I'll get some plates, Pobble said. Yeah, okay, thanks, Jed said. When Pobble returned, Jed scooped out a portion and handed it to Captain Bogg. Give it a try. The captain looked confused. He opened his mouth, but no words ventured free. What's wrong? The captain eyed the wisps of steam as if they were swaying cobras. It's been in the fire. It'll burn in my mouth. I can't eat that right now. Jed scooped a bite off the captain's plate and ate. See? I didn't get burned, and I'm just a scrawny wimp, remember? The captain offered a sly smirk, then scooped up a bite of his own. He looked at each crew member, then put the spoon in his mouth and chewed. He gazed into the sky, chewing. He said finally. And? Jed waited, but the captain didn't elaborate. At this, the crew lined up and shoved their plates toward the pan. As Jed served them, his heart felt like an angry lion trapped in the cage of his chest. He'd expected the captain to smile or grimace or anything except, What was it with these people and Kaiser refused to take a bite. Pobble shoveled food into his cheeks as fast as it would go. Sprocket poked tentatively at the chicken before testing small bits, and Riggs ate at a steady pace that didn't hint at anything. Silence filled the deck, bothered only by clinking silverware and the rattling engines. Riggs spoke first. Is there any more? He held up an empty plate. Relief burst through Jed. He grinned and piled seconds onto the plate. When the plates were clean, Captain Boggs stood and addressed the crew. It's time we put this to a vote. Kaiser, plate still untouched, stood. He turned the dish vertical. Food slid to the deck, splashing at its feet. Tastes like scrap. I vote no. Riggs, Captain Boggs said. Riggs licked the rim of his plate. Phew, I'm stuffed, he said, patting his belly. Can't remember the last time I ate so much in one sitting. So is that a yes? Captain Boggs asked. Course not, Riggs said, dragging his thumb along the last spot of sauce on the plate. Chin lifted and eyes closed, he sucked off the sauce and savored the flavor. I'm with Kaiser. Pile of scrap, utter waste, terrible. Toss the kid off the side. He looked at Jed, and his eye twitched in a mischievous wink that Jed interpreted as, this is what happens when you don't do what I ask. Captain Boggs nodded. 2 for no, and... Is there any left? Riggs asked, smacking his lips extra loud. Captain Boggs peeked inside the pan. A few bites. Riggs scampered to the pan and scraped the rest onto his plate. The captain chuckled and turned to Pobble. What's your vote? Pobble held his plate against his mouth, scooping up the last bits of mushrooms and chicken. Tomato sauce streamed down his chin. His cheeks looked like they each held an apple. He opened his mouth, but Kaiser hissed. Pobble looked over, and Kaiser glared, tightening his fist. Threat burned in his eyes, and his head made the slightest of shakes. Look at me, Pobble said, sloshing his belly with both arms. Do you think I'd turn down food that good? I'd lick 100 toilets if I could eat like that every day. He belched, then wiped his mouth and cocked his head. Even that burp tasted good. My vote's yes. 2 for no, 1 for yes, the captain said. Sprocket? She scooped up the last bit of chicken. Yes, she said, stuffing the food in her mouth. That's my vote. Captain Bog nodded. That makes 2 for yes and 2 for no. Jed's stomach tightened. He stared at the captain, thoughts bouncing around his head like loose springs. No, not him. How was it down to him? Riggs was supposed to say yes, but now the captain would chuck him overboard for a bit of evening entertainment. Scattered thoughts pulled together in Jed's mind, and he plotted. Sprocket's shatterbox. The sidearm dangled in a holster near her knee. I can get to it, he told himself. 2 steps, maybe 3. He only needed a distraction. The bathtub. He could push it over, and while the crew scrambled to put out the fire, he'd get the weapon. No one would expect it. Scrap, huh? Captain Boggs said to no one in particular. If this is scrap, it's the best scrap I've ever eaten. And I say Jed's sticking around to make more of it. Whew. Chapter 14. Jed rested against the ship's railing. Stars glittered overhead. Constellations he'd never seen looped through the dark sky as horned elephants and upside-down bicycles and lemon trees in full bloom. The clean air filled his lungs with cool relief. It smelled like cedar and spot-welded metal. It was a good smell. He was alive, and he would likely stay alive for a few days. As he gathered the dirty dishes from the bathtub, a soft red light pulsed in the darkness. He walked to the smokestack. Red glowed from the side of Captain Spyglass's head. The empty socket somehow stared at him. I know your secret, little boy, it said. Such a delicious secret. Makes you smell nice. If Father would let me, I'd slurp up your soup in 3 slurps. Jed grabbed a crate and climbed on top of it. The face followed him. What secret? What are you talking about? It chewed on its withered lip as if itching for something to taste. He wants you all to himself. It's not fair. Not fair at all. Who? Who wants me? It was then that Jed noticed that the red light was actually a small button. He reached up and pressed it. The light vanished, but nothing else happened. Soon, Spyglass said. Soon. Soon what? Jed asked. The head smiled and turned away. Its gears slowed, and it fell silent. Hello? He waited, but it didn't look at him again. Great. Say a bunch of cryptic scrap and then stop working. Perfect. Even some shriveled head seems to know more about me than me. He walked back to the bathtub and continued scrubbing dirty dishes. Thoughts of home crept through him. The key in his shoe suddenly felt twice as irritating. He touched the lemon in his pocket. The rind was starting to stiffen. He pulled it out and scratched it, then breathed in the smell of citrus. His passage home was buried, lost, forever hidden. His mom's flower-spotted aprons, the box of spices his father gave him last year, all of it gone, probably forever. Every memory he had of his parents lost in a cupboard hole. He stacked the clean plates and walked to the mess. The crew was asleep, but he preferred things that way. Nighttime solitude was soothing, the feeling that the whole world was sleeping while he was still awake. It felt like freedom and possibility and independence all wrapped up into one. As he pushed open the mess hall door with his hip, a faint creak echoed in the room, followed by a soft click. He froze, steadying the dishes so the stack wouldn't wobble. The thought of dread sulking in the darkness made his fingers cold and rigid. The porthole on the far side of the room cast weak beams of moonlight onto the uneven deckboards. He squinted, but nothing stirred. The empty room stayed quiet as the night. He inched inside and put the dishes into an empty barrel. When his eyes had adjusted to the darkness, he grabbed a can of black beans from the shelf and stabbed it open with a screwdriver. Black were always the best beans. He scooped out a spoonful, but before he could bring it to his mouth, something creaked below him. Riggs? No, Riggs had gone to the engine room. Another creak, this one fainter than the last, and then another. Footsteps, small and soft. He searched the floor and saw the outline of a trap door. The trapdoor Riggs had mentioned? To the stowaway cabin? The noises were delicate, too big for rodents, too soft for dread. Jed sat down his food. He crouched beside the trapdoor and pressed his ear to the wood. The footsteps were gone, replaced by tapping metal. He gripped the edge of the trapdoor. The wrinkled wood was old and its hinges rusted. "Don't creak," he begged. He held his breath and flung it open, quick and silent. No creak. He crept down a dusty staircase. A cold draft flowed through the empty shell of the ship. Dim light flickered in the darkness to his right. The yellow glow revealed a crawl space between gears and engine innards. Jed squeezed into the space. Bent pipes jutted out like ancient bones buried in the hull's mechanical graveyard. He crawled over cracked timing belts and decaying pistons to a small compartment. The pocket of space was no bigger than his bathroom at home. Black drawings covered the walls in streaked patterns and shapes. Eyeless faces, spindly trees, a grazing rhinoceros, and a lemon. Most of the drawings were tangled scratches huddled in recognizable patterns, but the lemon was full and rich with detail. Nearly as tall as Jed, it hogged more than its share of the wall. The dimpled rind looked real enough to peel. He stepped forward and peeked inside. The room was empty, except for a small girl jabbing a screwdriver against the top of the can. Her clothes were ripped, but not tattered or old. Her arms were skinny, but not starved, and though they were smudged with black, they weren't particularly dirty either. A sheet of long hair hid her face. The bright strands were like spools of copper. A thin stick, probably from a staircase railing, lay beside her. Its tip was burned charcoal, but most of the black had been rubbed off to make the pictures on the wall. "Hello?" he whispered. The girl squeaked and dropped the can. She scrambled to the far corner and clutched the screwdriver with both hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." She squinted and cocked her head. "You're that mouse," she said. "The mouse that doesn't belong." "Doesn't belong?" "Of course you don't." She lowered the screwdriver and arched an eyebrow. Her face was strangely unreadable as it cycled through expressions: anxiety, suspicion, contempt, divisiveness, alarm. Jed shook his head. "No, I don't belong here. My name's Jed." "Of course it is. How do you know my name?" She rolled her eyes and released an exaggerated sigh. "I have ears, don't I?" She pinched one as if to make sure it was still there, then pulled on it and turned her head to try to see it. Jed tried to hold back a chuckle. "Is something funny?" She released the ear. "No, why?" She tilted her head and leaned forward. "You know something special." "Something special? What do you mean?" "Of course you do. You do, don't you?" Jed swallowed. A manic jolt buzzed in her eyes, and the room felt a little smaller than it had a moment ago. "What do I know?" He glanced back the way he'd come. "How am I supposed to know? You wouldn't tell that funny mouse with glasses." "What funny mouse with glasses? What are you talking about?" "He told you about the hiding place." She swept her arms about the stowaway cabin. "He said he'd tell you this secret if you'd tell him yours. But you didn't." She nearly shouted the last word, and Jed jumped, bumping his head on a pipe. "Ouch!" He rubbed his scalp. "So they made you fetch things for them like a dog. Arf, arf." "I didn't have a choice. They wouldn't let me on the ship." "But you didn't find the cans, did you? Bad dog." "What's your name?" She smiled. "Shay." "How did you get here?" "I listened to Glasses Mouse." "Are you talking about Riggs?" She nodded. "Glasses Mouse was too busy watching you play fetch, so I crawled and snuck and stayed very quiet." "Shh." She held her finger to her lips and grinned. "Where did you come from?" "The big boat?" "You mean the steamboat?" "Was it a big boat?" she asked. Jed nodded. "Well, yes." "Then the big boat." "How long were you there for? Were you there before the dread came?" "You mean the scritch?" "The scritch?" "The spindly mice that look like wicked scratches and make your skin itchy, crawly, and scritchety?" She shivered and scratched her arms all over. "Yes, the scritch. Were you there before they came?" How else would I have gotten there, silly? Then you must have known my grandpa. He was on the boat too. I was supposed to meet him, but the ship was empty. Everyone was gone. She shook her head. Not me. I wasn't gone. What happened? Did they die? They died. Then they weren't dead because Scritches slurped them up and patched the leftovers into new Scritchlings. Then the Scritch skittered away. Clickety-scratchety beasties. Jed tried not to think about his grandfather dead, and then not. So few memories of him. A blue car seat, his wrinkly hands buckling the straps. The memory lingered and more details took shape. His grandfather's brittle voice as he snapped the buckles into place. Hey there, buddy. Guess what? You're going to take a very special trip. Then he threw Jed in the air, and Jed was falling, then floating, then falling again. Falling forever, it seemed, never landing. He struggled to connect the bits of memory. Floating in a car seat? That doesn't make sense. They felt like slivers of a dream that seemed so real, but disappeared before he could hold on to them. But as the memories trickled away, the sensation remained. Falling, floating, falling. What was his name? Shay asked. Your grandfather. Her voice shattered the picture in his mind. Huh? Oh, The letter from his parents made him pause. Never tell anyone your last name. He fought to remember Grandpa Jenkins' first name. Something odd. Something butterfly, he said, remembering. She sucked in a lungful of air and her eyes opened wide. Her pupils were the same metallic orange as her hair. Captain Butterfly? Hair on his lip, big nose, not like you. Your nose is like a mouse's nose. She scrunched her nose together in a surprisingly accurate imitation of a mouse. I have a picture. Jed showed her the photograph. Her eyes locked onto the image. He held it closer, but she jerked back. Did you know him? Jed asked. Her head cocked to one side, then to the other, her eyes never leaving the image. Yes, he's not nice at all. Jed turned the picture as if to make sure it was the right one. What do you mean he's not nice? The memory flashed again. Falling. Why was I falling? Because he put me in a tiny cage and hit me with a pipe. She pinched her fingers together as if to show how tiny. A chill rushed under Jed's skin as if he'd been stabbed with an icicle. He what? Her eyes were blank as she massaged a muscle on her arm. Whack! Her voice snapped like broken glass. Whack, whack, whack. Her fists clenched and flinched each time she said the word whack. Whack, whack. No, he couldn't have done something like that. She peeked once more at the picture. Oh yes, that's him. That's the one. Her voice was normal again, as if casually identifying an acquaintance. Are you sure? She studied the face. Her lips pursed, and she scratched her chin. For nearly a minute, she sat like a block of stones, eyes fixed on the picture. Oh, yes, quite sure. Quite. This one? She tapped the picture a half a dozen times. This one right here. A spastic shiver ran over her. Whack, whack, whack. But why would he do something like that? Her muscles relaxed, and she released a lungful of air. To teach me. I'm helping you, Shay. Whack. This is for your own good, Shay. Whack. It's a brutal world, Shay. Whack. You better learn your place. Stop acting pathetic. Learn not to cry when I hit you. Whack, whack. Jed's head swam and his skin hurt. He'd never thrown up in his whole life, but at her words, he suddenly wanted to. It can't be true. Maybe she wasn't telling him the whole story. Maybe she was lying. Why would she lie? Maybe she was confused, traumatized by the attack. His mind spun. It wasn't true. It couldn't be. She wasn't telling him something. His parents had sent him to find his grandfather. They wouldn't send him to someone like that. If they trusted him, so did Jed. It would have to be enough, at least for now. What happened to him? Is he dead? The word stung. Not this mouse, she tapped the image. Nope, not dead at all. They took him. Took him? Who took him? The Scritch, silly. Who else? They sometimes take special ones. Special? She nodded. Special how? How would I know? I'm not a nasty scritch, silly. What do they do to them, the prisoners? Bring them to the Scritchety Mouse King? She twisted her expression into a sour look. Mouse King of the junkyard. I don't like him either. He hurts mice. Flies around in his big fancy boat and think he owns the whole world. Well, he doesn't. Jed flinched as she yelled the last word. Shh. He held his finger to his lips. Why did he take my grandfather and leave everyone else? Why does the Mouse King take anyone? Jed waited for the answer. I don't know, he said. She said. I don't know either. He didn't take me. He left me. Left me for dead. Left me to get slurped up by wicked little scritchlings. But you didn't get slurped up. Shay checked each arm and then each leg. Nope. How did you escape? Sneaky, like a mouse. Shay twirled a piece of copper hair in her finger. I need to find him, Jed said. My grandfather. Do you know where the Scritch Mouse King is? On his fancy boat, of course. The Red Galleon. The Red Galleon? Where's that? It's where they took Captain Butterfly. Yes, I know, but how can I find my grandfather? She shrugged. You should ask the Scritchety Mouse King. I bet he'll know. She nodded to herself. Because he took him, she added, as if Jed couldn't piece that part together. Right, but I don't know where the Scritchety Mouse King is. I already told you, he's on the Red Galleon. Jed's jaw clenched. He spoke slowly so he wouldn't sound as frustrated as he felt. But where is the Red Galleon? How can I find it? She glanced at his hands, and curiosity glittered in her eyes. What's that? She pointed at his watch she pointed at his watch. What is what? He turned his wrist to obscure the watch. That! She scampered over on all fours. That! She grabbed his wrist. Her skin was cool and soft and hugged the bones in her fingers like a tight sheath. That! She tapped incessantly on the glass face. I don't know. It was a gift. She sucked in a delighted breath and clapped her hands. I know what it is. You're so lucky. It's so pretty, so pretty. Excitement rushed through Jed. You know what this is? She nodded and didn't stop nodding. Yes. What is it? You don't know? I already told you I don't know. His voice was tight with frustration. She stopped clapping and scowled. You don't have to be rude. She folded her arms in front and pouted. I'm sorry. I just really need to know. This was the last thing my parents left me. They said it was important. Oh, it is important. Very important. And pretty. Can you tell me what it is? Yes, I can. Jed waited. Okay, can you tell me now? Yes. So? She smiled at him. Yes. So what is it? He asked. She cupped her hands to her mouth and whispered into his ear. Relic junk. Jed nodded. That's what Riggs said. What is relic junk? Old junk. Why is relic junk important? It does things. What kind of things? Lots of kind of things. All different kinds of things. Jed clenched his fists. Shay was tougher to interrogate than a trained operative. What specifically? He said through gritted teeth. Well, she cocked her head. Captain Butterfly had a spyglass that could see lies. Lies? He infused the word with as much skepticism as he could manage. She nodded as if not catching the disbelief in his tone. And I've seen a music box that can put men to sleep. Wind it, then bam, asleep. That doesn't sound possible. Of course it's possible. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. She touched each of her eyelids. Jed looked at his watch, at the 6 unmoving hands. Then what does this one do? Her right eyebrow flickered. A knowing look aged her 20 years, but the look faded as quickly as it had come. It could make you Mouse King of the junkyard, the biggest mouse, bigger than the Scritchety Mouse King. And we're going to stop there for now. So my friends, the plot thickens. twists and turns everywhere. I still have no idea what might be happening. But I do know that I will continue reading this book and continue posting the videos a couple chapters at a time until we finish it, because I can't wait to find out more. My voice is tired from reading today, but I will definitely be back. So keep checking the YouTube channel. It's on the 4th grade playlist, and I will just keep reading until we figure it out. And then the good news is, when we get back to school, there is a second book. So if we like this one, we have another one coming, and I'm excited at that prospect. Talk to you soon, friends. Bye-bye.